Councillor Jansen, it's ready to go when you're ready to start.
Thank you. We'll give it another couple minutes. Who's missing? Just Councillor Logan.
Yes, Councillor Logan is not here yet.
Give it a minute.
Can you guys hear me? Councillor Logan has said that he's working, so he's going to be in and out, so I would not be waiting for him. Just before we start, does any of you use desktop for Zoom instead of your iPad? I'm just trying to figure out how to change my background. Does anybody know?
I do. I use a PC.
Doug, so do you know, like, if you're looking at your screen, what do you go to change your background? Do you know?
You see that icon, the video icon?
Yeah.
You hit that, the little arrow on it.
Yeah.
You can choose your virtual
Right beside
background.
it. Okay, got it. Choose virtual background. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Awesome.
Actually, Mayor, it's the foreground of your picture that's disturbing. The background we're okay with.
Hey, I represent that picture.
All right, thanks everyone. Welcome to the May 17th Transportation Committee meeting. I know you're all as excited as I am. Let's just go around the horn and just make note of who is here and your ability to hear and speak. Councillor Parkinson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter on mute.
Hello, sorry, I couldn't hear any of you and I just figured out why.
Councillor Kobayashi.
I'm here.
Mayor Martin.
Present.
Councillor Day.
I'm here.
And we'll give Councillor Logan a pass because he is working today. So thank you all for coming. I'd like to call the meeting to order and first acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples. Looking at the agenda, may I have a, actually, let's do it the other way around. Is there anyone opposed to the agenda as it's in its current format? Please make yourself known at this time. Nothing heard. We'll consider that approval of the agenda. The same goes for adoption of minutes. This is July 6th, 2020. I guess it's been some time since we had a Transportation Committee meeting, almost a year. Would anyone like to object to the July 6th, 2020 minutes being adopted? Thank you. We'll consider those minutes adopted too. Public participation, Mandy and Marcy.
Hi there. So we have had 3 written submissions which have been appended to the agenda, and we have 3 people registered to speak. So we can start with the first person. We have Paul Stinson. So we can ask him to press *6 to unmute himself.
Welcome, Mr. Stinson, and just a couple of ground rules, please. If we can keep this to 5 minutes, unless council, with leave of council to extend. And we are in receipt, I believe, of your email, Mr. Stinson. Please go ahead.
Okay. Before I get started, one thing of question. it's stated in the agenda that we can speak during specific items. Yet I know from the administrative staff has shared that we can only speak at the beginning. So which way is it?
So at the beginning of each meeting, we have public participation. Now's your time. There is one item. Nope, there is 5.
That's not what your agenda says, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Your agenda identifies that we can speak at and when the items are being raised.
Okay, so I don't have any objection to that. And I think it's a normal business that there's public participation at the beginning. And if you wish to hang about and speak to a specific agenda item, I'm fine with that. And I think that's the normal course of business, is it not, Amanda?
Yes, so for our committee, our council committee meetings, other than committee of the whole and council, it does state in the terms of reference that they are able to speak at each item.
Sorry, you broke up just at the tail end there.
Oh, sorry. It does state in the terms of reference that they are able to speak at each item.
Thank you for the clarity. And Mr. Stinson, that is, normally people don't stick around for each item, but you're welcome to do so. However, there will be a time limit on your ability to speak to each item. So please go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. That will actually speed up some of this beginning part of which I'm going to speak, and I'll hold back things up to specific agenda items. So in addition to the materials provided in advance of today's meeting, and I apologize, my name is Paul Stinson. I live at 305 Perimeter Place. And members of the Transportation Committee, in addition to the materials provided in advance of today's Transportation Committee meeting, which we eagerly look forward to responses to those questions, we also now wish to speak to the following. From a context perspective, on page 97 of the Transportation Master Plan, it outlines that some of the key data in the report is based upon, quote, the CRD last updated and recalibrated its regional transportation model in 2008 using 2006 census data and information from 2006 CRD household region destination surveys, as well as 2006 CRD employer survey. So when or how will the Transportation Master Plan and key arterial routes be brought up to date to better reflect current conditions and the new realities with regards to the densities of Royal Bay, Beach, and Latoria areas? And given key decision influencing data is clearly out of date, can this committee please explain how they plan and city staff are able to make good informed choices? Second, what actions and meaningful progress has been made with regards to your committee's duty statement identified almost a year ago regarding the traffic calming master plan, and how have residents been engaged on this item? And third, and lastly, where is the committee on the duties item that they raised about a year ago of an annual vehicle census, as this seems very pertinent to determining roadway improvements for going forward? And I'll hold my other questions till the specific agenda items come up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stinson. Over to staff. Mr. Molnar, any thoughts?
Just give me a second to work the device. Thank you very much, Mr. Stinson, for the input. I think that as we work through some of the information that's presented tonight, which is the chosen roads slightly revisited, Wishart Road and Veterans Memorial Parkway, that we further work to updating our transportation master plan, that the census data as quoted from the CRD has been replaced by our traffic consultants and our traffic work, which works on accumulated data. So it is more current than that which was projected by the CRD before. Pleased to announce that our traffic calming master plan is captured in part by our temporary traffic calming initiative that was considered by council and tabled. We have 4 areas of study underway, and the annual vehicle census will be something that I'm not directly responsible for, but happy to partner with other members of the city in bringing that forward, and I do not have a timeline for when that goes.
Thank you, and I see the Chief Administrator's hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Thank you, Chair Jensen. As council will recall, we staff through Sandra Russell presented the 2019 annual vehicle census last year with data that we received from ICBC, and we will do the same this year for the 2020 data.
Thank you, Robert. Mr. Stinson.
Yes. Yes.
Any follow-ups to that, or are you happy?
Well, I guess it really didn't answer the question of what actions and meaningful progress has been made with regards to the traffic calming master plan and how residents have been engaged to develop that.
So my understanding is this needs to be prepared by staff, and then it would go public after that. So am I right, Brent? Are we at the stage where this would be shared publicly?
Absolutely. We're using our Let's Talk Colwood site to gather information from the public as we speak. All those streets that have been implemented with temporary traffic calming measures have been approached in terms of how to reach out to the city. And what we're hoping for is constant feedback, frankly. We would like people to judge it initially. We'd like to see if them test their opinion some point about the mid-scale, and we'd love them to test their opinion again at the end of the 3-month trial. We are more than receptive to compiling that information, presenting it back to the community as to what we've heard, and then if necessary, trialing a different project. It's quite an exciting opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar.
Sorry, I apologize. And if I'm speaking out or by all means, correct me. But in the transportation master plan, that's not the flow of how that material is developed, and I had assumed that the traffic calming master plan would follow the same route as the transportation master plan itself in how it was developed in concert with the community, not in isolation. And then I'll leave this alone.
So it sounds to me like this is happening more in real time. Brent, do you have any response to that?
I think Mr. Stinson may be speaking to the transportation master plan, or the traffic calming master plan, which is supposed to look at the entire lagoon area, which I believe was tabled for 2022. I can look on that date. I've got a book beside me that I can flip through. However, Councillor Jensen, you are bang on right. This is happening real, live, and we're more than pleased to be working in the community to gather information and feedback as to the temporary measures that we've installed. Thank Council for tabling that initiative for us.
All right, thank you, Brent, and thank you, Mr. Stinson. Amanda, I think we're ready for the next participant, but I just wonder if you can include me in your as a meeting organizer there. I can't seem to take down hands.
Okay, sorry about that. Oh, I think, Gabrielle, you're going to need to do that for me because I am not the host of the meeting.
Thank you.
So our next participant tonight, or this afternoon, is Roger Conrad. Could you please press *6 to unmute yourself?
Mayor, councillors, administrative staff, members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Roger Conrad. I live at 309 Perimeter Place. Like Mr. Stinson, I reviewed the agenda today. I really am prepared to speak more on 5.1, but I have an overall general item I'd like to talk to. Based on, and what I'd like to do is, if I may, give a context, then give some comments, followed by some questions. Based on the context is based on council member statements during council meetings and the CRD reports, 90% of Colwood is made up of residential properties. And this represents commuters going to primary destinations outside the city for work. Could you please explain why the only progress to shortcutting traffic has been the recent trialing measures for 90 days on symptom areas rather than ignore the root cause of the problems? The Transportation Master Plan speaks to the city taking action. Why has it not taken action for one of the most prolific shortcutting routes in Colwood, namely Hatley Drive and Machosen Road? Doing a trial on Milburn without having pre-quantifiable data on Hatley before the trial started is not going to show too much results. So I'd like somebody to answer those questions, please.
Brent?
Thanks very much. My apologies on the delay on cue. I'm just moving my mouse from monitor to monitor, and I have to first find where it is. I'm not sure I heard the question. I would be pleased to ask for it to be repeated. What I did hear was the question about Machosen Road being considered a shortcut route. Machosen Road is not considered a shortcut route. It is
Machosen at Hatley. They turn off Machosen on Hatley and then down to Milburn.
Yes, thank you very much. So we actually recently had that portion of work in our Machosen sidewalk, and due to the input from the community, the direct Hatley Grattan neighborhood, we felt that before installing, we should actually try out some initiatives. And I believe that you and I have actually spoken about the fact that we can certainly try out those temporary traffic calming initiatives, just like what was designed, and gain your input, as well as the community's input on how they are perceived. And so they would ultimately be to limit right turn movements from Machosen Road onto Gratley and Hatton, but insofar would do nothing to limit left turn movements from Machosen Road onto Hatley Grattan. We're more than pleased to also test that out to allow the community, because there is mixed opinion in the community that has been received from staff or by staff into which method is of highest preference. So what better opportunity than to allow the community to speak through trial initiatives as tabled through council. Thank you.
Mr. Molnar, wouldn't it be applicable, though, to have some numbers prior to the trial to see how effective the speed bumps are going to be?
Thank you very much. The request from council was immediate temporary traffic calming measures, so we could touch the areas that were being received most voluminously through to the council table. We did identify those areas primarily. Firstly, we also looked at our existing traffic calming requests, which are frankly numbering less than a handful. And so we do have areas that we are watching. Your areas came out prior, and that meant that we didn't have the data collection tools in place in order to meet the immediate requirement of engaging the community. We are pleased that we have been immediate, and quite frankly, if we've affected positively that traffic, we are more than pleased to see that anecdotal information come from the community that it's changed. We are also working this year, within about a month and a half, once our cellular data gets up, to install traffic monitoring devices at the intersections to be able to measure origin and destination, as well as travel time savings. So it would be lovely to have them in first, but we would not be able to respond to the immediate nature of the request and direction. And we're more than pleased to start working with the community on those temporary measures in place.
And thank you, Mr. Molnar.
Mr. Jansen, would you like me to continue, or would you like me to stop and let the next person who's calling in speak? My remainder of my items are pertaining more to 5.1.
Yeah, so we'll call for an opportunity for each agenda item, and I think the previous caller is going to wait around as well, so you're welcome to.
Thank you.
Amanda?
Okay, so the next person we have registered to speak is John English.
Welcome, Mr. English.
To speak, please press *6.
Mr. English, are you there?
Are you there? Oh,
There you
hello.
are. Yeah.
Oh,
Go.
great.
ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council, for taking my call and input today. As you know, I'm a member of the Royal Bay Homeowners Association, and we have some comments that we would like to share with the Mayor and Council. on the Transportation Committee.
So
First of
go
all-
ahead, Mr. English, and you are limited to 5 minutes.
Yep, I understand. As you will recall, we've made a number of submissions in the past on this subject, but the thrust of what we're talking about is the city seems to continue to look at issues in isolation. And we have said for quite some time now that the city really needs to prepare an up-to-date transportation master plan to properly manage the anticipated increase in traffic in our city in a cost-effective, safe, and responsible manner. We've been frustrated and disappointed on the subject for quite some time, and in June of 2020, we were particularly frustrated and disappointed when city staff told us that the 2014 master plan, along with the joint Bunce-Watt memo of October 2019, constituted a satisfactory plan for the city to use to develop its roadways and transportation systems in an efficient and responsible manner. We were astounded by what we were being told because the transportation master plan was prepared at a time when there was a very different view of how the city would be developed. Prior to the current OCP, the city had planned that commercial development would be scattered in small nodes throughout the city. Now, as we all know, the new plan is to develop 2 major commercial centers, one at Galwood Corners and the other at Royal Bay. The Bunt and Watt joint memo also cautioned that their recommendations had been developed strictly within the constraints that city staff had laid out for them, and they had specifically not considered Metchosin Road. And the scale of development planned in and around Royal Bay could not be supported without expanding Latoria Road from 2 to 4 to 5 lanes. And that doing so is likely to present major challenges due to roadbed suitability issues, due to constraints on the ability to widen Latoria Road, and due to environmental stewardship issues. We continued to be dumbfounded when a later staff report suggested that the scale of residential development planned in and around Royal Bay would only increase the number of vehicles on the chosen road by about 2,000 per day. The advice to council we found to be absolutely ridiculous. The scale of residential development planned in and around Royal Bay is almost equal to the total number of residences within the entire city of Colwood. In addition to massive residential development, there's to be a major commercial center developed in Royal Bay Commons area. The Royal Bay waterfront lands are to be developed into a world-class regional destination. If that's successful, it will bring in a lot of extra traffic, just like is the case in White Rock, BC. The ferry service that the city has been lobbying will also substantially increase the amount of traffic coming in and out of this area. The city of Colwood is going to be, is currently actually going through the largest and most fast-paced developments in its history. The city desperately needs a sound, realistic, and professionally prepared comprehensive plan and schedule to improve and update its road system to support the scale and pace of development planned in and around Royal Bay. The Royal Bay Homeowners Association is encouraged to see council is beginning to give further consideration to this matter. We'd specifically recommend that council direct that appropriate qualified civil engineers and engineering geologists be engaged to identify the suitability of various routes for potential road expansion to most effectively, cost efficiently, and safely support and enable the scale and pace of development being planned in and around our area. Routes involving Latoria and the chosen roads are especially in need of this examination. Potential new roadway routes also need to be considered. A possibility is through the Allendale lands, because that any route that might help alleviate pressure on the overall road system should be examined. Appropriately qualified professional biologists should also be engaged to conduct environmental impact assessments of potential expansions that might be considered in areas designated in the OCP as being environmentally sensitive. These reports not only identify what likely adverse impacts to the environment would be, they also provide potential solutions and actions and strategies to mitigate these adverse impacts. which in turn enables the expansion of roads in a responsible way. Particularly important again around Latoria and the chosen roads where there are environmental sensitive areas designated. The most traffic efficient and most cost effective options should also be made available to the public and to neighboring municipalities such as the District of Metchosin for their input and review. Hopefully, this will help facilitate buy-in and support from within the community and from neighboring communities. While we appreciate that this is now late in the game for conducting such a study, the need for it is not undiminished. It is absolutely so.
Thank you, Mr. English. Any response, Mr. Molnar?
Thank you very much, Councillor Jensen, and to Mr. English and the rest of the committee. I very much actually appreciate the opportunity to respond. The statement that Metchosin Road was excluded from the initial study from the Royal Beach, Royal Bay South analysis considered in the joint memo is frankly false and wrong, and I appreciate the opportunity to correct it. It's directly included in it. The consultants were asked to look at preferred roadways, and so for that they looked at conflict, and there is less conflict on roadways such as driveway influences and other intersections or speed limiters on Latoria and Veterans Memorial Parkway. So all north-south connectors, including Metchosin Road, Wishart Road, Veterans Memorial Parkway, were all included in the joint memo and none were excluded by staff. And the consultants wouldn't have frankly let it be excluded because they're all the north-south roadways. So it was never the intention, and I appreciate the opportunity to correct that error in statement because frankly it's wrong. I'm pleased to announce that the Latoria Works geotechnical evaluation has not only been underway, but I have already reviewed the draft report for those works. I'm waiting for the final rendition, in which case council will receive that information in a report. But I'm pleased to advise that we've already received that. I'm also pleased to advise the environmental study for Latoria Road is also well underway. It started well up in Q1 of this year, as well as started work in Q4 of last year with the intersection works. When a report is prepared for council, you will be able to see it. Mr. English might be informed as to the timing and objectives of those based upon the fact that the budget was not enabled for 2020, where they were enabled for 2021 projects. And so both have been commenced in Q1 of this year. And I'm more than pleased to announce that reports on the environmental are expected around Q3. And as I say, I've already received the report for the geotech, and the civil will come after that. We've got 7-10 years to come together with the plan, which are first formed with the geotechnical analysis, secondly formed by the environmental consideration layered on top of each other, and thirdly by the scoping exercise, which is yet to happen with council, and then fourthly by the civil consultant, taking all the previous information, scoped and analyzed, and then to bring about a design with potential cost implications. For that end, however, council has also considered Latoria Road to be and form part of our development cost charge program, as they have considered Metchosin Road to be part of the development cost charge program, as they have considered Wishart Road to be part of the development cost charge program, Veterans Memorial Parkway to be part of the development cost charge program, and as raised by Mr. English, east-west connectors, just like Latoria forms, are equally as important as we work northward. So Allendale as well is part of the development cost charge program that's in draft form and first and second reading as considered by council. So all the matters raised by Mr. English have actually already been commenced and are well underway. In regards to coordination with our adjacent peoples, Metchosin is more than informed about our actions. Matter of fact, they are completely informed about our traffic as well as our development applications that we have right now, and are actively working with us on how we interface with each border. And Langford is as well intimately involved because of their interaction with the Olympic View site. So they are very, very aware of the works that are going on at the intersection of Latoria at Veterans Memorial Parkway, how the development is feeding through all three municipalities being Olympic View. And so those works are multi-coordinated with those individuals. And so I'm pleased to announce that Mr. English can check with all parties and find out information's had. Thank you.
Thanks for the update, Brent. And Amanda, that's it for public participation. Is that right?
It is.
Thank you. Moving along to new business 5.1. Over to you, Brent, to introduce your team of experts.
Thank you. I think that, and through the chair to the rest of the committee members of council, I'm going to do a bulk introduction. Urban Systems is our consultants for all three of these cross sections that we're looking at today. We're firstly going to go back and revisit a portion of Metchosin Road. There was an error transposition in the numbers, which working with Urban Systems is identified as being important to table up with members of committee and council today. So Metchosin Road will be our first factor that we talk about. It closely relates to Wishart Road because the area of transposition with numbers is at the intersection of Wishart Road and Metchosin Road as it goes out to Sooke Road. And so you'll see some duplicate slides there. Then after we deal with Wishart Road, so firstly Metchosin, then Wishart, we'll move on to Veterans Memorial Parkway. Please answer questions as we go, as was tabled. However, Metchosin Road, we actually expect a fair bit of input from those members of our audience as well as members of committee. And so more than pleased to pause as questions come up. Just raise your hands. Both Dan and I will be looking for that. With regards to Wishart and Veterans Memorial Parkway, we think they'll be a little bit more fluid if we held our questions to the end, but I'll let Dan Casey from Urban Systems lead us through those. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dan Casey from Urban Systems. Dan was the consultant that led us through the initial Metchosin Road example, and then these further three. Thanks very much, Dan. Take the stage.
That's a great introduction, Brent. Thank you. And just as far as process goes, I agree. Let's hold questions to the end. And before we go to the table or bring it to the table, I will ask that our callers get an opportunity to make a statement or ask a question through the chair. Thank you. Over to you, Dan.
Great. So can everyone hear me all right here?
You sound great.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brent. Appreciate that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for having me here this afternoon. So I'm going to load up our first visuals here. Okay. So Metchosin Road corridor study update. We did, as Brent noted, there was an error that was previously made on the traffic volumes that were presented earlier this year. And so we really did want to circle back with council to present the correct figures, which are contained on the following slides. And then importantly, we wanted to highlight any changes to the key takeaways based on the updated information. So I'm going to walk through that now. So the visual that's on the screen in front of us, this is actually Wishart Road, which we're going to talk to in detail in a little bit here. But we wanted to highlight the interconnectedness between what's happening on Wishart Road and what's happening on Metchosin Road. And so don't worry so much about the volumes on Wishart Road here, which is shown left to right, but more so, and we will get into those in our next agenda item here. But more so, we wanted to highlight that really the interconnectedness between what's happening on Wishart, both now and increases into the future, and then how really that transition of those vehicles in and out from Wishart onto Metchosin is layering on top of the corridor volumes that are on Metchosin Road. So the section that we've highlighted top right of the screen in yellow is really meant to emphasize that. And so keep that in mind when I forward on to our next visual here. So this is, the red line is traced over Metchosin Road. This is an updated version of one of the slides that was presented a few months back specific to Metchosin Road. And again, with this section of Metchosin I just showed on the previous slide, highlighted in yellow, and this is the one we're going to focus in on here. But what I did want to do was present the updated, the correct future projections for traffic volumes along the corridor. So what we are looking at here, the Metchosin Road corridor has been broken into a series of segments. For each segment, there are 4 different volume figures. The silver volumes, the silver numbers refer to 2014 average daily volumes that were generated for the Transportation Master Plan. The volumes in red represent 2019, and those were related to the traffic analysis that was being undertaken in South Colwood. The figures in gold with the white background, those were what was presented a couple months back to the group. And those are reflective of projections through the Transportation Master Plan and the CRD, the regional modeling. But really, and why we're here to correct this, is what should have been presented are the figures that are in gold with the yellow background. And so those are representative of 2040. They're projections, so it remains to be seen how whether we get there, how quickly we get there. But they are the projections that was included in the work through the joint memo for Latoria and South Colwood. And so I wanted to focus attention on those. We'll work from south to north. But for the section of Metchosin Road south of Latoria Boulevard, the projection is approximately 10,000 vehicles per day in 2040. Moving north, it starts to grow. North of Latoria Boulevard, 16,000 vehicles per day. Moving as far north as almost the Wishart Road intersection, it's upwards of 18,500 vehicles per day. And then really where I wanted to draw attention, and this is where the interconnection happens between the Metchosin Road corridor and where Wishart Road's intersection occurs, is really we start to see quite a significant jump to 25,500 vehicles per day projected for the section of Metchosin Road between Wishart and Sooke Road. And so really that is an accumulation of volumes up and down the Metchosin Road corridor, as well as volumes in and out via Wishart Road. And so with that, we did want to, again, highlight it in yellow, is that segment of Wishart Road, of Metchosin Road between Wishart Road and Sooke Road. We really did want to highlight the potential for increased laning at some of the intersection points and possible increases in turn lanes as well to help alleviate some of the congestion that's likely in that area with volumes that high. And I guess alongside that, recognizing also that this exercise is focused primarily on traffic volumes, but that this stretch of road has also been identified through parallel active transportation planning initiatives. And so there might be the opportunity to not only look in a little bit more detail at some of these traffic challenges, but also address some of your active transportation objectives through this corridor alongside that. And so bringing it back to the interrelationship with Wishart Road, from left to right, we're looking horizontally at Wishart Road here, which this is a slide we'll explore in detail in the next agenda item, but wanted to highlight what we just talked about this northernmost section of Metchosin Road, how important and how interconnected it is to some of the other longer term improvements that might be occurring along Wishart Road as well. So with that, I'll wrap up on the Metchosin Road section. We'll be moving on to Wishart and Veterans Memorial later, but I think the plan here is to pause and open it up for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. That's a good spot there. First, I'm going to go to our callers. Amanda, do we still have Mr. Stinson and Mr. Conrad on the line?
Okay, so what we can do is if one of them would like to speak, if they would raise their hand, *9. So when you called upon them, then they would, if their hands were raised, then you would know who would want to speak at each item.
Okay, let me fish through here. Mr. Conrad, are you there? *9.
So Mr. Conrad has his hand raised. If he presses *6, that will unmute himself.
Perfect. *6, please, Mr. Conrad. And the floor is yours.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. In the context again, and this is addressing agenda item 5.1, it appears that the presentation by staff, or the presentation coming from staff for this meeting, only has one slide related to Metchosin Road. The rest is on Wishart. When will there be a deep dive into maximizing traffic flow on Metchosin Road between Latoria Road and Sooke Road be conducted, as this has been an outstanding request at the November 23rd, 2020 City Council meeting? In other words, when will there be a full engineering study done at these two locations or between these two locations?
Thank
So if
you.
someone would like to, Matt?
Thank you for the question. And my understanding is I think that's ongoing. Go ahead, Brent.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that that statement, Councillor Jensen, that it's ongoing. That is exactly right. We did a deep dive into the scope exercise, which brought about the traffic volumes in November of 2020. That's the slide that Dan is correcting here with the volumes, which is bringing specificity to that section from Wishart Road to Sooke Road. If Council recalls, in the 2020 to 2024 budget deliberations as carried forward into this year, there was intent to do study at the Sooke Road at Machosen Road intersection. That should translate back for the laning and geometrics down Machosen Road so that we can work out that intersection geometry. That was not scheduled for 2020. That was scheduled for 2021 with the intention to have a shovel-ready project by 2023. That remains on the schedule and list. So I just offered that for councils and committees awareness. But the deep dive into the scope exercise and the consideration for Machosen Road commenced before November, was considered by committee and council in the report after November of 2020, and is augmented by this information here presented by Mr. Casey in Urban Systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent.
Follow up to that, Ben. Currently, the Transportation Master Plan outlines 89% of the traveling public use vehicles, and that the plan use by 2038 is for a target of 70%, which is a reduction of 19%. My comment to that is Machosen Road for the future, taken from the Transportation Master Plan, outlines the cross-section percentage of the road allowance. Please explain why the rationale as to why 33% of the right-of-way will service 70 to 89% of the targeted vehicle use. Why then is the rationale is to 45% of the right-of-way to service up to a maximum of 18% for bicycles and pedestrians. Please explain why portions of the remaining 22% for green space and buffer zones would not be used to accommodate a third lane running right down to Latoria.
Through the chair, I'd be happy to explain all of that. That was the exact reason for the scoping exercise that council undertook as led through Urban Systems to prioritize the use of the right-of-way. Our right-of-ways by our official community plan are prioritized to put single occupancy vehicles, or frankly, vehicles, last in the list. Council reviewed the consideration for the right-of-way and then put bikes in line with our official community plan, as well as pedestrian linkages, as top priority. Now, Machosen Road itself will continue to run through two school zones unless those schools relocate. Machosen Road will continue to have restricted right-of-way width. It was not designed like Veterans Memorial Parkway, which was pushed through at a much later date by the Ministry of Transportation and Highways for other objectives, which was the movement of goods and services. Machosen Road has and will continue to operate through two school zones, have 3 speed reductions, and will be contained within a 20-meter right-of-way. Council prioritized those in relation with our official community plan, and I'm more than happy to either let Dan Casey or answer any other questions that may be dealt with about our official community plan prioritization schedule. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Dan, anything to add, or is that good?
I mean, happy to just follow up on a couple items. I think, I mean, one would be the cross-section that's shown from Machosen Road. It's similar to the cross-section that's shown in the TMP for some of the other major roads as well, is showing a good but a basic sidewalk provision. Sidewalks at 1.8 or 2 meters wide is anything too much narrower and you're into a facility that can't accommodate, we'll say, wheelchairs or strollers in opposing directions. Same with the cycling facilities. What's been shown is good and it would be an improvement, especially as applied continuously along this corridor over what's there right now. But by no means, like if we went too much narrower than that, you'd be left with a facility that was unsafe and no longer functionable. And so in terms of the spatial allocation of that roadway to the various modes, I mean, really the allocation of space is to achieve a facility that is safe, comfortable, and appropriate for active modes, but by no means is it going too much further than that in terms of taking up excessive road space relative to the portion of the trips made by those modes. I think the other point maybe to pick up on is that, as I understand it, the projections, the 2040 traffic projections from that joint memo process don't necessarily account for as substantial a shift in travel modes toward transit and towards active modes as the official community plan envisions. And so if that is achieved or partially achieved to the extent envisioned in OCP, in TMP, that not only would there be a sort of a shift in the percentage of people traveling by each mode on that corridor and other corridors, presumably the traffic generation would actually be lower than what's been imagined as well. And so a bit of comfort possibly taken in that as well.
Thanks, Dan. And to the council.
Would you like me to continue or stop and
So
let
if
somebody
you
else?
have, do you have much more? Because I need to bring it back to the table, Mr. Stinson.
Well, I can wait for other people to speak. I just, we have several points and questions related to that. And, I guess I could fire questions back at them. This traffic study, I guess, is assuming one person per vehicle, when in fact, there's quite often more than one person per vehicle. And I think it's, unfortunately, to me, it's looking at the traffic flow is going to be compromised to meet the needs of the pedestrian, which is only going to make at best 18%. And so this is going against Colwood's green plan, because you're going to have a lot more traffic idling rather than moving.
So I take your points. However, I think a lot of these decisions are consistent with the official community plan, which was developed by the city with input from council and input from the community, Mr. Stinson. So, and this is in line with that.
I was Mr. Conrad, so don't blame Mr. Stinson. So how about if I bring up one more point at this time, and then I can let the council members, the committee members, and Mr. Stinson speak.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Conrad, go ahead.
Okay, improvements to the roadway to meet the stated goal by council on November 23rd, 2020, to maximize flow between Metchosin border and Sooke Road. There would be an improved flows with the inclusion of the third lane, or safe left-hand turning pockets for residents living along Metchosin Road. Please explain why, when we have a 20-meter wide right-of-way, that the positive impact of maintaining good traffic flow to Royal Bay, Beach, and points beyond as it continues to increase is not being planned or considered.
Dean?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a great comment. And frankly speaks to why we amended the contract as let for the Metchosin Road sidewalk improvement projects. We felt that we had more work to do, and as Mr. Conrad speaks of, we are in frequent email communication, and I'm more than appreciative of that, because it allows me to understand a bit of the lens that the community is looking at some of our recent considerations as tabled through council. He's also correct that it's interesting that a parking ratio and a transportation number is different. Obviously, we're hoping that people carpool, but obviously that's a personal choice. And that's the reason why we're doing a traffic study every 3 years, is to see if the improvements that we're making on mode shift are starting to be actualized and realized. Frankly, we'd like to go farther and find ways to monitor the pedestrian traffic as well, so we know if it's increasing, as well as the cycling traffic, so we understand how it's increasing. So I appreciate the communication that's been levied. As about the left turn components, oftentimes left turn bays have been created for gut reasons. And it's not meaning to say that they're wrong or right. They may be warranted or not from a traffic perspective, and can very often be driven from the public perception on safety. That's one of the reasons why we affected that portion of works being undertaken this year, so we could work with the community to better understand their left turn goals. We also felt as staff that it was necessary to undertake that larger traffic calming initiative to understanding shortcuts for people that live in the Lagoon neighborhood, for how people are actually getting to that shortcut route. It may not be just one or two, it may be a combination of multiple factors that commence on Metchosin Road and translates down into affecting the overall perception. So more than pleased that we've arrested that, recognize that it's a little bit frustrating because we continue to talk about that left turn geometrics, but we have left room for the community to continue to explore. We've left room for temporary traffic initiatives and projects, and we've left room for that overarching study before implementing that left turn bay all the way down the road. We've also left room in the right of way for it to happen because it can't happen in a 30 and a 20-meter road allowance. So very much appreciate the comment and offer that there is opportunity in time.
Thanks, Brent. Mr. Stinson now, are you still on the line? I'm not hearing anything. *6. There you go.
Yes, I put my hand up.
Go for it. I see you there. Go.
Okay, so I won't belabor the point about Metchosin Road and the left turn lane, et cetera. My question is, and it goes a little bit into your agenda item 3, but it's used as a point of context. Diagram on page 9 of 15 on the Latoria Veterans Memorial presentation outlines a split of traffic of 15 to 20% to Wishart, 15 to 20% Metchosin, and 30 to 35% towards Veterans Memorial Parkway. So, given those facts, if over 40% of the density that will be coming is located on Royal Beach, using your 2,850 against the 5,900 total, then how could it be that less than 30% of the traffic in the area is planned to use Metchosin Road, which would be the easiest route for them to use since it's a right-hand turn? The numbers that are shown don't seem to simulate reality, but something else. So can you please explain how and when the city will plan to arrive at the justifications of the breakdown between each of the arterial routes?
Thank you very much. And through the chair, Mr. Casey, would you mind handling that question, please?
Yeah, I can do my best. I think what those are general figures. They're kind of rounded to the nearest 5 or 10%, just kind of given the overall uncertainty about what things might look like 20 years from now. But the intent there, and this was work done through that joint memo process, was that it reflects not only sort of origin and destination for travel, but also the capacity within each of those roadways. And so there are some assumptions made on how long certain trips might take. And part of that is performance of specific roadways. And so part of the planning and part of the assumption that was built into that joint memo was added capacity on Latoria and added capacity onto Veterans Memorial, which would make those more desirable routes of travel for folks, especially for some of the longer distance trips that are extending maybe beyond Colwood city boundaries. And so that's, I mean, that is really why that I think it's a 15 to 20% destined for the Metchosin corridor. The remainder sort of keyed on Veterans Memorial, but also Wishart and Latoria to the west and other routes as well.
Thank you, Dan.
Go ahead.
I'd like to.
Sorry.
Do you have any final thoughts, Mr. Stinson, before I bring it to the
Well,
council?
I had one follow-up. The follow-up is, given the data as shown represents a 60 to 75% of the total traffic, I'm assuming the 25 to 40% that is missing from the traveling public is those that are using shortcut traffic routes then? Is that the plan? Because your data from Wishart, Metchosin, and Veterans only adds up to 60 to 75% of the traffic volume. So where's the rest?
So if I could, through the chair, what's in there is there's a portion of trips that will both originate and end within that southern Colwood area. And so, you know, with that included, with the each of the arrow and the approximated percentages on the major roads in the vicinity, you know, brings that total to approximately 100%. There's obviously a range been presented for each of the major roads, and I actually asked sort of the same question myself of this, and was reassured that between those internal trips within South Colwood itself, as well as the approximate percentages down each of the other major corridors, that the trips have been accounted for.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mr. Stinson.
I did have a couple other things, if I may.
Well, you know what, Mr. Stinson, I need to bring it back to the council table. Can you hold your thoughts, please? Is it critical at this moment, or can it wait till the end here?
Well, my question was, we submitted a large volume of questions beforehand and trying to find out when or how those questions will also be answered, because those are also critical and pertinent to this discussion.
Okay, we are all in receipt of your emails, and my understanding is that you're in direct communication with our engineering department, so I'm going to have to leave that up to them because they're the experts. Thank you. And Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Jensen. My question is to Mr. Casey, I guess, through the chair. And I'm certainly glad we brought some sanity to these numbers, Dan, finally. And it certainly wasn't the 2,000 vehicles. So now I feel a little vindicated. I'm not some crazy guy here, but it's great to see that. I guess my question, a twofold question. Number one is, you know, we're a bunch of neophytes when it comes to this. I'll speak for myself. I am a neophyte. You're the expert when it comes to this, doing this traffic study stuff. And, but, you know, it's obvious to me that, you know, now we are using the joint memo numbers, which is great. I'm happy to see this. And I mean, I'm not happy because the numbers are that much higher. I guess my question now is, you know, this is probably one of a very, very important decision that has to be made by council. And, you know, and should I be losing sleep over these numbers? Like, what is your confidence in this? I mean, you're the expert, and, you know, we have these numbers. Does this make sense to you? You know, and give me a confidence level from your point of view, of you being the consultant, the expert. Help us, you know, so we can sleep a little better at night. And the second question I have right now is related to this right now, and that is these numbers are all based on the population growth that we're going to have there. But as you said earlier, I caught what you said, that this doesn't, of course, the numbers that don't offset these numbers are things like our active transportation plan. The numbers could reduce, blah, blah, blah. But then on the other hand, the numbers could also increase because we're planning to put, you know, a potential ferry there, right? And it's a potential center of commercial, which means you have employment, which you have more traffic. And so I guess, you know, maybe they're offsetting in the negative way. So I wouldn't count on, but I guess what I'm trying to get from you, you know, from your expert opinion, please make me feel real comfortable. Like, are these numbers keeping you up or not? I mean, are these good numbers in your professional, from your professional viewpoint? Like I said, I don't know. Thank you.
And please help Colonel Kobayashi get a good night's sleep for us all.
Through the chair, great comments, great questions, great line of thinking, and do appreciate you posing that question to me. I think this 20 years is a long time. The magnitude of development that's being contemplated in South Colwood is considerable. And so in my mind, there is a lot to be determined between now and then. In terms of the study work that's been done, we've had the chance, myself, we have others within our team here at Urban Systems who specialize specifically in traffic analysis. had the chance to dig around and vet the analysis that was done through the joint memo process, and you know, a few comments here and there, but generally it was approached and executed the way you know, we would have done it ourselves. So from that perspective, I am comfortable with the work that was done. I think the other piece to all of this is the and Brent could probably elaborate on this, but the requirement for review and update every 3 years as development plays out. Whoever came to the determination that that was a good path forward should be patted on the back, because that's going to give you your checkpoints along the way to see. We don't go from year 0 to year 20 and figure out, you know, did it occur the way we thought it would or not. We have these check-ins along the way. And for me, and I hope for this group as well, that gives a lot of comfort in terms of watching things progress the way they were projected to, or not, or otherwise, and gives the opportunity to course correct along the way if things progress quicker, if things progress slower. So I think it's a tough exercise, but I think the exercise that has been undertaken has been done well and thoroughly, and gives me comfort that you know, to the best of all of our abilities, we are trying to project out how things might change in the future. But you're not wrong in wanting to pause and sort of make sure, do we have this right? Because I think there's the potential for a lot of change between now and then.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dan. And the last part of my question, Chair Jensen, is the one thing that I don't see considered. You know, you look at Wishart, we look at Metchosin, we look at VMP, but we have this other issue right now, which is the other escape route, which is along Ocean Boulevard, and a lot of the people are using Hatley down to whatever it's called, or going down straight down Lagoon. That's not addressed in this overall plan. I mean, is it going to be addressed? How does that change the numbers, if it does at all? That's the last of my questions. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Kobayashi and the other members of committee and council. That's a great question, Councillor Kobayashi. They're all excellent questions, and I want to thank everyone for their engagement and involvement on this. That rat running is something, and that's probably an inappropriate term, but that's something that's been going on for decades. And I think the community is now rallying with the traffic impetus from these developments to say, and if it's been going on for decades, Brent, or members of council, it's going to continue going on for decades more. What we're doing is we're going to bring about this year, as I indicated, we're just waiting for some cellular data captured and are working with the providers to install the same system that we've got monitoring Souk Road and other areas of town along the intersection nodes at Lagoon, at Metchosin Road, and further down on the Ocean Boulevard. So we can start to measure what is the congestion, what's the speed, and what's the travel time information relevant to that. One of the other really unique factors about that system is we're actually able to measure origin and destination. It doesn't get down to car A travel through this, but it does be able to give us data on how many people are starting out in the Royal Bay neighborhood and using those shortcut routes, or how many people are coming through Metchosin or passing through and using that shortcut routes. I think when we for other reasons, affected the traffic on Ocean Boulevard in these past bits of time in 2020. We saw that the community really relied on that. They relied on it for not just a commuter way, but an enjoyable travel route in their vehicles. Understanding where they've started, where they're going, how they're interacting, are they using the business district, and how are they going, I believe is the next piece of the puzzle to come back and to look at that whole Lagoon area. Isolating Metchosin Road as a contributing factor from that is just one thing. How Metchosin Road plays into that contributing factor is the reality of what we're hoping to bring back. And so very pleased that we'll be installing those devices this year as soon as all the manpower and equipment is in place. And we'll be able to report on that. And we'll be really pleased to be able to talk about stats on change, on how many people are using this road, how many people started in this node of the city of Colwood, and how many people are traveling through it and right out the other side, or if they're going to a business locale, for example, in Colwood. And so keen to be able to deliver that information once we've got it. As identified by one of the callers, we don't have it at the start of our temporary traffic initiatives, but we will have it midway through and be able to translate that out throughout time. So I hope that answers your question in addressing that shortcut routing.
Thank you, Brent.
Sorry, you were on mute, Chair.
Sorry, I'm waiting for you to unmute, and I was muted. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Day.
So my question is, given when you put up the slides and we all see the highlighted section from Wishart Road to Sooke Road being, you know, an area of special concern where the numbers are the highest and where we likely need the most opportunities to mitigate those issues. I'm just wondering why we haven't talked about Allendale, because that is the alternate route to the very congested portion of Metchosin Road.
Yeah, I mean, through the chair. So, I mean, the work that's been done on the joint memo work was specific to South Colwood, obviously, and the work that was done traffic-wise for the Allendale site was specific to Allendale and those sections of Veterans and Wishart that they would access to and from. I think having those being done independent of one another, you'll see on our Wishart Road and our Veterans Memorial slide packages that we'll work through in a few minutes here. We have taken Allendale into consideration. For Metchosin, it wasn't. It's not necessarily factored into those figures that are presented. I think, I mean, what might change or how it could impact, it would probably be fairly minor. I think some of the vehicles that are ultimately destined for Veterans Memorial and into, say, Langford or up to Highway 1 eventually, potential for them, if congestion were to occur on Metchosin Road approaching Sooke, there is the potential. Some would seek to go via Allendale and make its way out that way, but I guess my feeling is it would be quite low, but yeah.
I can add to that, Dan, if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
Thanks very much. Councillor Day has mentioned Allendale a couple times, and I very much appreciate it coming back in. As Mr. Casey points out, this joint memo of which he's based with, which Urban System is then working through the Transportation Master Plan validation exercise. The joint memo didn't take into the particulars, and when we bring about a specific project or a specific rezoning or a specific subdivision, we do have the ability to ask for additional traffic studies. Allendale, for its land use and density as considered right now as being developed, has been considered. We did receive a study from Watt. Those studies are received and interpreted by staff as a portion of the process that's going in. And as such, the intersection at Veterans Memorial Parkway at Allendale is being paid for by the developer because the traffic study indicated that the developer will need that sort of service. But what I think that you're more speaking to is not how it interacts with Veterans, but how it provides that east-west connection in a similar sort of way as Latoria. Mr. Casey's bang on right. It didn't come into the Metchosin slides because it doesn't connect with Metchosin. It connects with Wishart. So when Wishart was looked at as a contributing factor from developments such as Olympic View and other developments, as well as the Allendale development, Watt Consulting did take that into consideration. And as such, Allendale is now included in our development cost charge program that has received first and second reading, recognizing that there is a need for that east-west connector, that it will be driven by the development and the needs caused by development. And so very pleased that it has formed into some of the considerations, but not that for Metchosin. largely that for Veterans Memorial Parkway and Wishart to provide that east-west connection. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Day.
Thank you. Well, it partially does, but it also majorly doesn't, because if you drive Wishart Road, which I have done for a very long time, you will observe that probably 80 to 90% of the traffic that approaches the light at Wishart and Metchosin Road is turning left. In fact, so much so that people who are coming from the Royal Roads end of Wishart Road often get cut off by people who forget that there might be traffic, oncoming traffic at that intersection. So with all the traffic that is being directed from Wishart Road onto Metchosin Road to Sooke Road, having an alternative when all of our roads become more congested, possibly, 2040 or whenever that may be, would make a great deal of sense. You would also impact people who might be choosing active transportation, because if you turn on Carindale, you have to ride your bike up a very steep road. If you turned left on Allendale with active transportation, you would not only have a more level, easier ride journey, but you would also avoid the far more difficult crossing of Metchosin Road and the more congested portion of Metchosin Road. So there's, I guess, a lot of observations on my part based on looking at where do people need to go in our community, and that may change obviously in the future as more options become available within Colwood itself. But many of our residents are still accessing services in other neighboring communities in order to meet their daily needs. And I think it's really important that we provide a range of options to mitigate that, and not only look at, whether, Metchosin Road between Wishart and Sooke Road should be 2 lanes or 3 lanes, but whether or not there should be alternatives to taking that Metchosin Road. Thank you.
Those are great questions through the chair. The intention of working with Urban Systems is not to come up with detailed designs for intersections, which I think is where we're going on. But I think that we need to remember in November, when we looked at Metchosin Road, that we did table the fact that the intersection of Metchosin and Wishart would need to be reorganized, meaning that the laning and geometrics, what had preference, what had free lefts or free right movements, the synchronization of the lights would need to be undertaken inside the next 10 years. Same thing with the intersection at Sooke Road and Metchosin Road. And the intention of the Transportation Master Plan, if you look at the Transportation Master Plan, doesn't actually deal with those factors. It deals with the cross sections of the linear roadway. So more than pleased that we're tabling the intersection geometry, because the intersection geometry is where the performance of a roadway is often measured. It's where that level of service comes into play that you've heard both Urban Systems and myself talk about. And those will need more specific studies. What we're intending to use by the joint memo as we refresh it every 3 years or on a greater frequency is to bring specificity to the timing of when those intersections need to be improved. And they will be necessary to do a separate study with a traffic consultant engineer to specifically look at the queue links, the storage bays, the prevailing movements, and even the signalization and timing. That likely at Wishart and Sooke Road would take into account Allendale because of its proximity to the intersection and the need to synchronize the left turn bays and geometry of how those flow together. So those would likely be undertaken at the same time and would be anticipated anywhere between year 7 from now and year 10 from now.
Just a very quick follow-up. I am not referring to the geometry of the intersections. I am referring to, because all of our diagrams are showing number of vehicles per section of roadway, that is what we're looking at. So I'm simply saying that if you have two roads that are both leading generally in the same direction, you have an opportunity to divide that traffic between the two roads rather than trying to accommodate it on one.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Baxter.
I have unmuted myself. Look at that.
Thank you.
I just want to expand on something Dan said, but I think this is directed towards Mr. Molnar. So we will have every 3 years a review of what's actually happened to the traffic, as well as what's predicted from that point on. But as I understand it, we also have a schedule of road improvements that need to be done with times when they need to be done, what year they need to be done. And if the 3-year review begins to indicate that something needs to speed up or can slow down, that can also be implemented as a result of the knowledge of how the vehicle numbers and how the modal split is actually going. Is that right?
Sorry, that's correct. So the 3-year timing trigger, just to provide a little bit of further information for you, Councillor Baxter, and through the chair, the 3-year timing trigger is embedded in both the Royal Bay South and the Royal Beach. And interestingly enough, those dates for when those 3 years started aren't exactly synchronized. So frankly, we're going to be doing a traffic study every 2 years from the areas, capturing the information from the area, or it could even be more frequent than that. So I think we're going to be quite on top of it. And you are correct. The joint memo did speak to thresholds. It didn't, and staff brought forward how those thresholds might be represented in years on an average growth cycle. And you're very correct. We can see that accelerate or decelerate. And that's the reason for the studies all the time.
Now, just taking that a step further, if for some reason there was some great holdup in, say, 4-laning Latoria, would that potentially cause a pause in development if we could see that it was going to overwhelm current Latoria Road?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So now a question.
Sorry, go ahead, Michael. Did I cut you off?
That's okay. A question very much for Dan. The 25,500 shown on that final section of Machosen Road, that needs 4 lanes to accommodate it, doesn't it?
Not a straightforward answer, but generally streets with volumes up in that range, you're getting there. Yeah, it really, Brent touched on this. It does, the congestion happens at the intersections, not necessarily on the length of the road itself. And so not necessarily a yes or no answer, but you're getting up there quite a ways. Yeah.
So it's only a 20-meter right of way, I believe there. So getting 4 lanes in is not going to happen, I don't think. But I presume these numbers are arrived at originally by a computer that worked out where people would go based on how long it would take them to get there and other factors. And that if the time it takes is actually much bigger than had been anticipated because you can't provide enough capacity, then the traffic will just transfer to some other road where there is free capacity.
Everything you just said there was correct, I believe. And I think that's where this watching progress, watching how quickly things progress toward those 2040 figures, we can hopefully start to see if congestion's getting to the point that it's discouraging a certain portion of drivers from using that corridor and redirecting them somewhere else.
Thank you. So that's what gives me comfort with these numbers, is that the checking process and the chance to amend plans depending on what we're actually seeing. And I just want to speak a bit about bicycles. So one of the things that I used to hear all the time is that we have to provide a means for the people between 8 and 80 to travel. And a lot of those very young people, pre-license age, and some of the very old people, which I'm getting to be, cannot or do not drive. And I've actually had to give up driving because of vision problems, and I now travel by electric bike for all of my transportation needs. And I must say that it's a lot of fun when the facilities are provided, and it's scary as heck when there's no bike lane. And it's also very healthy exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Jansen. I'll try not to be too long-winded. First, probably for Brent. And I guess it really stems from these increased numbers that we're seeing on Metchosin Road. And in November, we talked a lot about it and maybe do this and maybe do that. Will Metchosin Road be coming back for another discussion at council? It looks to me like probably everything we thought about in November was at, approximately half the traffic flows. Perhaps it needs a revisit. Is that scheduled?
Through the chair, no, Councillor Parkinson, because of the impact of that increase in volume was from the Wishart intersection to Sooke Road. So in the eastbound direction, no, sorry, I got that wrong. In the westbound direction. No, we haven't thought about doing it because we'd be bringing that segment back in with the intersection works as we started to work on the Sooke Road as it translates down. However, if council wishes to revisit it, they can certainly request it and we will certainly bring it back. I'm not sure what new information you'd like to bring about with specificity, but we certainly can.
Well, I think you've heard me talk. I mean, I think we should be looking at maximizing the ability to move traffic through there. And I'm a proponent of trying to get third lanes in to prevent problems with all the driveways and all the accesses in there to some extent. I mean, if we're going to be building stuff, putting down curbs and sidewalks, I think we have every expectation that concrete's going to be there for 80 or 90 years. So we want to get it right. And there's a lot of constraints. There were a lot of constraints at, one section here, I'm looking at 10,000 cars a day, now 17,500 cars a day. I don't know how many driveways are in that section, but enough that there's, again, it seems inconsistent to me that we would resist a third lane that might help people get in and out of their driveway. At the same time, we're using a significant chunk of right-of-way for Michael on his electric bike, and a few other cyclists like that. There's probably more people trying to get in and out of driveways than there are cycling to work on Metchosin Road. So, one suggestion I heard was perhaps we could allow for 3 lanes, but put a lot of planters in there. And then, as these traffic studies come along, maybe we'll see we do need more. But I just can't believe that, the discussion we had at 6,000 and 10,000 vehicles per day, we don't go back and revisit it when we hit 16,000 and 17,500. Maybe it comes out the same. We heard tonight Mr. Casey saying, yeah, probably need 4 lanes in that first little section. Maybe there's some ways around it if traffic goes onto other roads, which don't seem like they've got a lot of surplus capacity. And then Michael's saying, well, you can't fit 4 lanes in a 20-meter right-of-way, so that's not going to happen. Well, we got some issues here, and the sooner we address them and look at them, the better. So, it's not up to me to decide what comes to council, what doesn't. But I will be lobbying for that. But maybe here's not the time. Go ahead, Brent.
Thanks very much.
Sorry, Chair.
Why am I even here?
And I responded to it too. So thank you very much to Councillor Parkinson through the chair, Councillor Jensen. Thank you very much for that question. The interesting thing about third lane geometrics is it's the same question as bus bays. And I'll just table that up loosely. BC Transit doesn't like bus bays because it removes the bus from the travel lane. It gives them a harder time reintegrating into traffic, and they prefer that the traffic just waited behind the bus so that way they could keep going. So the choice to make a pullout or not isn't Transit's choice, because it's never their choice to separate themselves from traffic. It's the city's choice on the fluidity of the movement, and that's for the fluidity of the travel lane. If council wished, and with several $100,000 of budget, we could just bring forward a design. And what we were trying to be is sensitive to those portions of road and sidewalk that were already installed and maybe weren't installed against property line, as seeing if we could get some benefit. But if council's desirous of a third lane, all it does is allow free flow geometrics for the existing lanes of traffic. Where we'll need to bring in a traffic consultant would be the queue lengths. So when you stack up behind an intersection, how long that should be, that would be driven by the volumes. That queue length can grow from a third lane over the course of time, and it can be morphed well easier than, as you said, moving around curves. So if council's desirous of it, we can bring forward a design on a scope exercise for a third lane, absolutely, and look at what those costs are going to be, and then look at the implications for right-of-way. I would recommend that we do far greater study, though, on the section from Wishart Road to Souk Road. There is, and it's been pointed out several times, there's some roadways in there that have some interesting intersects with Souk Road that are close to other intersections that maybe need to be reorganized, which will be quite a sensitive topic to those neighborhoods because we're affecting part of their entrances. But otherwise, we can certainly go about it. I can go out and ask for people for a scope exercise based on the third lane geometrics, and we'll just work to that. If that's the will, because there's no overt reason for saying no other than the fact that we're trying to work with our existing installed works and services.
And we have others, works and services to be installed on Metchosin Road in the not too distant future. So
very much so, but we can do that under a design that talks about the surface exercise, and then we can work to augment that with the minors afterwards. It all depends on how frankly, how you'd like to spend your time. It takes about 3 months to organize this report and presentation and give to you. And so I could spend that same 3 months working with a consultant on that next exercise.
now if I could perhaps go swing to Mr. Casey. I guess I just want to be sure that the numbers we're talking about here, I know they came from the joint memo. Do they represent full build out of Royal Bay and Royal Beach and Olympic View and the lands in between? Or is this a 2040 number when we think, I think our OCP says we're another 6,000 or 8,000 people when we hit that 2040. So I want to make sure that we're talking about, ultimate long-term build out. Is that correct?
Yeah, as I understand it, it's the numbers that were being contemplated as those comprehensive rezonings were coming forward. And so it takes in those land uses.
Thank you. And so, and I guess frankly, to be perfectly honest, as a city's consultant on this, I'm looking for you to give us confidence that what we're getting and what we're basing this on is sort of the gold standard in traffic engineering. You seem to indicate, Mr. Kobayashi, you'd looked at it and you'd had other people in your office look at it. Are you comfortable that this is kind of as good a job as people could do with the information everybody has today?
As best as we can tell, I think like that joint memo had two different traffic engineering firms bringing two independent analyses together in a joint fashion. And we've had kind of a third group here have a look through that as well. And so, with the caveats of, we don't exactly know how quickly things are going to progress and all that.
Yeah, not
a lot else.
Just give me confidence.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Any other first-time speakers before I go back to Councillor Kobayashi? Go ahead, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Chair Jensen. I was just wondering if Councillor Parkinson was going to make the motion, because I'd second his motion that it be re-looked at, that we go revisit the whole Metchosin Road question in light of all the new information that we have. So Councillor Parkinson, were you leaning that way, or do you want me to make the motion?
I Well, I want it to happen. Whether we need a motion here or whether we should discuss sort of timing and process with staff before we make the motion, I'm easy. But I think obviously we need to come back and revisit this. Yeah.
Let's flush this out. Back to Brent. Is this going to happen organically, or do you want some direction from council?
It is not going. Thank you very much, Councillor Jensen. It is not going to happen organically. This being a committee meeting, we will take the results as expressed. So Councillor Parkinson's a statement as expressed through also Councillor Kobayashi will come back as an option for council to consider as a result of all three considerations today. We can bring it forward now as a recommendation from committee, but I've certainly heard it and will include it as part of the recommendations and considerations from council and provide a resolution for you.
Does that work for you, Councillors Kobayashi and Parkinson?
I got to tell you that it probably makes more sense to let Brent go away and kind of think of what an appropriate level of work is to bring back, and then Doug and I can change it as we see fit after all his work. But we'll try to be easy on it.
I am sure you two will keep us all honest. Thank you very much.
I'm good. I'm good with that. Thank you.
All right. Not seeing any other hands. 5.2, which is, I believe now we're on to Wishart Road. Are we back to Mr. Casey?
We are back to Mr. Casey. Thanks very much. Dan, when you are ready, lead us off, please.
Happy to. Thanks, Brent. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So we all now see a red title slide. Good.
Could I place a question to the chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Conrad.
Yes, I had one more item on 5.1, which I can leave to the end of the meeting if you would like, or I could bring it up now, whichever is to meet your
Go ahead, let's get it out of the way.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you also for being very liberal with my time. The signalized intersection planned for Latoria Road and Machosen Road instead of a roundabout. That's the context of it, and I've spoken to a couple of industry specialists. One works for or contracts with the Ministry of Highways. Another was a supervisor for a major company that does road work on the Ministry of Highways, and I was asking him about roundabouts. And neither could see any reason why a roundabout couldn't be located at the bottom of Latoria on Souk Road. They're both familiar with the area. They say room currently exists before development begins, such that the roundabout could be established there very easily. By shifting the approach for the northbound traffic on Machosen Road to Royal Beach side, there would be enough room to accommodate a large roundabout. The grades, and they stress this, the grades on this section of roadway should not impact the location, and in fact could additionally reduce accidents by not having traffic stop on hills. So could the committee please explain why a roundabout is not being considered? I did some research with the U.S. Department of Transportation, which produces a 181-page engineering study. Now, honestly, I didn't read the whole thing, where roundabouts even included pedestrian crossings. So I would suggest that members may want to look at this engineering study, and before any final decision is made, take a look at it, and I'm hoping somebody can come up with a real good reason why there isn't a roundabout there. And I do thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Conrad. Brent, I see your hand there. Do you have a quick answer?
Sure. So in the 2004, I'm looking at the wrong screen. In the 2014 Transportation Master Plan, an intersection, traditional intersection was called there. And through all of the Royal Bay North and Royal Bay South considerations, that intersection as a traditional intersection was always considered. However, 2 years ago, we did ask for the consultants to consider a roundabout there. One of the factors of constraints was not necessarily the grades of approaches coming in and coming up from Royal Beach, which is an obstacle. It's frankly the land falling away on the other side and the retaining walls that would be necessary, as well as what's considered offset traffic volume. Roundabouts work very, very well for low volume intersections, for medium volume intersections, but when the inputting volumes from all of the legs of the roundabout start to get offloaded, you can start to see those roundabouts failing. There are examples just outside of our local community where the dominant flow is not equal in all four legs. It's for those dominant flow characteristics and the land and the retaining wall necessary on the falling land on the beach side that predicated it back to a signalized intersection. Further, we did ask them to flush that out a little bit further because we didn't expect much contributing volumes from the south, from Metchosin to change. And so we wanted more of the Royal Beach volumes on Metchosin Road to come in, but it was still an offset volume intersection that would have ultimately led to failure. So the failure of the intersection. So a traditional intersection was again brought back as reinforced as to the intersection of choice. That was what was also considered in the development agreements. So the developer was bound to undertake those works, and staff at that point did not change it from there. Hope that answers it.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. Over to you, Mr. Casey.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, next we're going to speak here to the Wishart Road corridor. We've undertaken a similar review, presenting some comparable information to what we've seen for Metchosin Road in past, but this time specific to Wishart Road. So I'll start off just with an overview of why we're here. The primary objective for this, and this might be review, but the primary objective is to confirm the desired long-term configuration for Wishart Road. We are dealing specifically with the section between Latoria and Metchosin Road, not the piece further to the north of Metchosin Road. Some of the parallel considerations: how will space be allocated within the road right-of-way? How will the needs of various travel modes be balanced? And how will the corridor be built out to reflect the context and surrounding land use and activities? Visual on the right is from your transportation master plan. It clearly identifies Wishart Road, which we've highlighted in yellow, as a collector road. Collector roads fit within the broader network as part of an overall network of highways, arterials, collectors, and locals, and they serve a distinct purpose. So as defined in the Transportation Master Plan, collector roads are intended to connect traffic from local roads to arterial roads and place equal importance on traffic movement and access to properties. So important to keep this in mind when we start getting into some of the active transportation components, as well as the traffic and the traffic volumes along this corridor. An overview of the corridor. There's a lot here. I guess the pieces to pay particular attention to, and you all know your community very well. We're dealing with about 2.5 kilometers of Wishart Road. We've got sidewalk and or asphalt walkways in place along portions of the corridor. So those are shown in blue and gold lines. Some of the key destinations along the corridor include Municipal Hall, as well as the elementary school, the fire hall to the northern end as well. We have a couple parks that are accessed along the way, and then crossing locations, whether at intersections or mid-block, identified with the little crosswalk symbol along the corridor. And then we've got a number of bus stop locations, and they tend to appear along the corridor in pairs, so one in either direction. So this is the exact figure actually that we presented earlier, but worth zeroing in a little bit on some of these figures as they are specific to Wishart Road. So similarly, we in the silver, those figures represent 2014 through the Transportation Master Plan. The figures in red represent more recent through some of the traffic analysis done related to development. And then the 2040 figures are shown in gold. And those are projections, and those are again based on the work that was done through the joint memo. And so if we move from south to north, and I'll identify the numbers and explain a little bit behind each. And so at the very south end, we've got volumes today are quite low. They're at about 1,500, and they're projected to increase to as high as 9,500 in 2040. A lot of that is traffic that's beginning or ending in South Colwood, Royal Bay, Royal Beach. Moving north, current volumes to the segment south of Carindale Road are at about 3,000 vehicles per day, and they jump to about 10,500. And then for the section north of Carindale, today we're at about 3,500, and in 2040 projection is about 7,000. And so really the reason for that is part of the traffic that is projected to come in and out of South Colwood via Wishart will actually use Carindale and then head over to Veterans, in and out via Veterans, and continue on north or begin their trip and head south via Veterans. So what we've got is, and we'll see this even more clearly in the Veterans material, is a fair number of trips that'll actually skirt east-west via Carindale, which is why that 7,000 in the north section is actually lower than the 10,500 in the middle section. Just to relink the discussion we had earlier, and so this again is zoomed back in on Metchosin Road. We are highlighting that section again in yellow, and just to really draw attention to the interconnection between these two corridors and where they converge at the Wishart-Metchosin intersection, and how we're basically layering on the traffic volumes for that section of Metchosin between Wishart and Sooke Road. Some key statistics for the Wishart Road corridor. Some of the traffic volumes, we currently are between 1,500 and 3,500 per day. That's projected to increase to between 7 and 10,500 by 2040. Speed limits along the corridor are 50 kilometers an hour, with the exception of the 30-kilometer-an-hour school zone in Wishart Elementary. There are a number of intersections up and down the corridor, some mostly minors, a couple more major ones as well. And a fairly large number of driveway crossings, particularly in the southern or the northern half of the corridor. The right-of-way is there's some variation, but it is most typically 20 meters wide, the bulk of the corridor, and that's typical for a municipal right-of-way. And we have a number of transit routes on the corridor currently, and also worth acknowledging that in the Transportation Master Plan and in the official community plan, as well as BC Transit's planning documents, Wishart is identified as part of the local transit network. And so we can sort of make the assumption that transit will continue to operate on this corridor as it does today. So we touched on this diagram in the discussion earlier. And so what we're showing here on the left-hand side is, we're in approximate terms here, but the first line in the table on the left-hand side is showing the peak hour total trips generated in South Colwood and in the Allendale developments, as projected through the studies associated with both those sites. And then line 2 is an approximate extrapolation of what those peak hour, so busiest hour trip volumes might project into if considered over the entirety of a day. The diagram on the right-hand side then is taking those, with those total number of daily trips in mind, what percentage of the total trips might find their way onto each of these major corridors in and out of South Colwood and in and out of Allendale. And so that's what's shown in the with the arrows and the percentage figures on the diagram on the right. And so most important, I guess, to Wishart Road is the 15 to 20% of the South Colwood daily volumes, anticipated to find their way onto Wishart Road. And then I did introduce a few minutes ago that a good quantity of that 15 to 20% is projected to use Carindale to access VMP and continue north-south via VMP. The rest would remain on Wishart. Also worth acknowledging that the Allendale, although the magnitude is not as large as in South Colwood, the 5 to 10% of those Allendale generated trips are anticipated to enter-exit via Allendale Wishart Road, and so we've accounted for those as well. Some information was gathered on median travel speeds. And so this is an indication. The red means less than 30 kilometers an hour. The orange or the yellow means 30 to 40. And the green means 40 kilometers or greater. And so if we look, and then on the left, we've got the AM peak hour, 8 to 9 a.m., the midday in the center, and on the right, we've got the afternoon. And so really what the diagrams are showing is that for Wishart Road, we're generally showing green. We're at 40K an hour or greater. We do see some sort of fairly obvious reduction in travel speed associated with the school zone, which is probably just fine. And then where we do see some delay is on the side roads, Cairndale, for example, and specifically at the intersections. But generally what we take from this diagram is that performance on Wishart Road today, vehicles are traveling at speeds that indicate there's not a lot of congestion or delay along the corridor. Collision history was reviewed as well. And so this is information, reported collisions through ICBC information. It represents a 5-year snapshot between 2015 and 2019 inclusive. The data really does point to the 2 major intersections at either end, so Metchosin Road and Latoria Road. That is probably to be expected given the higher vehicle volumes that travel through those locations, and we are not seeing much in the way of collisions elsewhere along the corridor. And so really from a collision history perspective, there's not a lot of reason to look specifically at any of these intersections or crossings along the corridor as a location of underlying safety concern. So referring back to your own official community plan, and this is probably review for most, but this one piece on modal hierarchy is very important when we start talking cross sections and allocation of road space along this corridor. And so we wanted to re-highlight and reaffirm your own modal hierarchy policy, which talks in order to walking being highest priority, then public transit, cycling, goods movement, high occupancy vehicles, and finally single occupant vehicles. And so this is really complete streets is the term. This is really frames our thinking about how we balance space and how we balance the competing interests of these various travel modes along this corridor. So back to the transportation master plan, the diagram on the right-hand side is the recommended cross section for Wishart Road from the transportation master plan. We've undertaken this exercise to sort of review and validate that cross section. And generally, we believe this is still an appropriate cross section for this corridor, with the addition of possible left turn lanes at key locations where they might be necessary to facilitate specifically left turns and improve overall intersection performance. And so those would be on a case-by-case basis, and some of the more recent traffic analysis, which I think I have on the next slide here, touches on some of those possible locations. So moving along the corridor, south to north is left to right on our screen. Just wanted to go through one by one and talk about some of the suggested improvements. They've all been highlighted in the various traffic analysis that have been undertaken and coordinated with overall network improvements that are planned in South Colwood. So moving from south to north, the Latoria-Wishart intersection, possible signalization with added turn lanes at approximately 30% build out of South Colwood, and then added laning on Latoria Road itself with turn lanes to get on and off at Wishart at 50% build out. And so that's at the southernmost end. If we work our way north to the Cairndale Road intersection, so some of the traffic analysis does identify that it would be nice to have a northbound left turn lane. So for vehicles progressing north on Wishart, a dedicated left turn lane that will allow them to get out of the through lane and make a left onto Cairndale. But really, the opposing traffic southbound does provide a pretty good number of gaps that allow left turns to be happened as it is. And so not necessarily jumping to the full recommendation or conclusion that this left turn is necessary, absolutely necessary. So we want to keep it on the radar, but not necessarily go there quite yet. Also worth noting that the Cairndale side leg, the east-west on Cairndale, we did see in those median travel speed figures that there is a bit of delay incurred on that movement. And so part of helping that along might be added turn lane on the Cairndale leg of the Cairndale Wishart intersections. That would allow left turns and right turns, dedicated pockets, so that say someone waiting to make a left turn doesn't hold up the right turners to the extent they do now. The Allendale Road intersection has been identified for possible signalization. The sort of the work behind this concluded that really the traffic contribution from the Allendale site is primarily going to be Veterans Memorial directed, and less so in the Wishart direction. And really the volume of traffic accessing Wishart at Allendale does not itself warrant a signalization. But with the volume of traffic we are looking at through volumes on Wishart, some of those vehicles on Allendale may experience considerable delay trying to make those turns. And so that's where a signal could be considered if we want to create more gaps to allow specifically the left turns and the right turns, but specifically the left turns to be made. And then lastly, drawing this parallel again to the Metchosin Road intersection and the segment of Metchosin Road, Wishart to Sooke Road, we did want to just again demonstrate how kind of the family or the suite of improvements over the future along this corridor really directly relate to what might happen on this segment of Metchosin Road as well. So that brings me to the end of Wishart Road here. And now I might have missed this. Do we want to jump right to Veterans Memorial, or would we rather pause and discuss?
Let's take a pause right there. I'd first like to go to our two residents, star 9, please, Mr. Stinson and Mr. Conrad.
I think it's star 6.
Sorry, star 6 is to unmute, star 9 is to raise your hand. Thank you. I see you, Mr. Conrad. Go ahead. The floor is yours, Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad. We'll come back to you in a second. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand. I've seen a lot of flagging survey stakes along Wishart Road, and I'm just wondering, do we have any sense of how what we're calling for with this strategy would be enabled within, you know, does this mean that we're cutting down trees, or does this mean that we're making lanes narrower, or how do we affect what you're talking about?
Through the chair, I think that I'm best to answer that question to Councillor Day. Councillor Day, no part of the exercise undertaken by Urban Systems involves survey or detailed analysis on the ground. So the survey stakes and markings that you see on Wishart Road are not for the purposes of this presentation today. Hence why I thought I should answer it. I think that the stakes or the survey marks that you see on Wishart Road are relevant to the 3510. Works and Services is going to install sewer and the 3 new properties that are created along that frontage, as well as Royal Bay has an obligation with Sector 7, which is nearly their last sector of development on the north portion of lands, to provide a sidewalk and frontage improvements along the strip of Wishart Road that fronts that strip of park and trees that are on the top. Frankly, it's not park. It is intended to be park as part of the Royal Bay development. And so I have a tree survey in my hands provided by the developer, which is Gablecraft Homes, as well as a requirement for them to build a trail. And always we look at site adaptive principles in regards to all of the factors that come forward. But there are choices, as council has seen in some places where there's a house, where that envelope is created by the zoning bylaw. You are able to clear trees within that zoning allowance or within the footprint of the home to accommodate it. Urban or site adaptive design takes into account topography and storm drainage primarily, and the infrastructure and the natural resources of the environment as well, but secondarily to the storm drainage to be able to affect those flows. And so when we look at a piece of road like Wishart, for example, One edge, especially as it fronts that Royal Bay development, one edge is a cliff. That is not the edge that we're going up. It is a sheer rock face that goes 10, 15 meters and would be incredibly expensive to do work on for no net effect other than to gain a foot of right-of-way. So instead, we are looking to go towards that park boundary and frankly, thank Gablecraft and how they've studied the area and how they've proposed to go about realizing the works. Because we've gone and identified the significant trees, looked at the ways we can work around it, and that is a design exercise in play right now. So the direct answer to your question is yes, site adaptive design and the minimal impact to the existing infrastructure, existing ecology and trees forms part of every action undertaken both by the engineering department and development services department. However, we do recognize that for some of the effects that we like to bring forward, as well as are outlined, there does sometimes need to be impact, in which case I do have a tree consideration for that section right now. So that's why I see all that flagging there, and hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. When I drive Wishart Road, I find that geometry, the road, the horizontal geometry, a little harsh. To make it into a collector with the traffic volumes you've got, does that horizontal geometry work, or will there have to be a bunch of curve realignment? Anybody looked at that?
It is an arterial. Not a collector in the sense, and that was not part of the exercise that was undertaken for urban systems. Note directly, we haven't looked at it. However, it is also working to affect the speeds on a 50-kilometer-an-hour roadway. If Councillor Parkinson would like us to smooth some of those bends, it will impact the rocks and trees that we're madly trying to work our way around. And it's a lovely route. Hopefully, once we get bike lanes in there as well, we're looking at a neat pedestrian way that's sneaking it around the trees for the Royal Bay frontage. So hope it meets the delivery that you're hoping for.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, probably more suitable for Mr. Casey. So we're showing here the 2-lane cross section with the 2 bike lanes, as we've shown on Machosen. I think Latoria you'll get to, but I suspect there's bike lanes on that too. As you sort of looked at the number of vehicles a day on Machosen Road, you said 25,000. Rule of thumb is that would probably be 4 lanes. Is there a rule of thumb for how many cyclists warrant the width of bike lanes? I mean, I'm a good cyclist. I like to cycle. I like to get out there, and I love it when I have a nice wide bike lane all to myself. I just wonder about the justification if we're having, you know, nice commuter cycle bike lanes everywhere for, you know, we project that 10% of the trips or whatever it might be in 2040 will be by bike, but a lot of those won't be the commuter ones that take the arterial roads. They'll be just over to the coffee shop or over to the grocery store. I guess my worry is that we're spending a lot of money, eating up a lot of right-of-way to build incredibly nice bike lanes, and, you know, are we overdoing it? Is my question.
Yeah, through the chair, really good question, or really good line of thinking. And I think the discussion of the debate on bike lane width is less about volumes, number of cyclists, and more about a baseline of safety and comfort. And so what's been shown there, I believe, is a 1.8 meter lane plus a boulevard space of about 2 feet. That is now considered to be a baseline of quality facility design for a buffered bike lane from the roadway. Nothing about that is actually sort of like above and beyond in terms of width due to any sort of consideration of cyclist volumes that might be on there. The only time when you really do get into it, it's more a function of what's happening on the roadway beside it. And this being a collector road, the assumption is it's upwards 5,000 or above in terms of vehicles per day. And for safe cycling and comfortable cycling, you do need that lateral setback from the roadway. The only time you really do get into, and we're not there here, is where you get into added width because of a real high number of cyclist volumes is on, you know, regional multi-use trails or some of the downtown facilities in, say, downtown Victoria or even bigger cities, where passing and things is something that you want to provide space for. But by no means do the dimensions that are contemplated here are they allowing for that.
So I guess if we were to look at, you know, 2040 and have an estimate of cyclists and some estimate of where they're coming from and where they're going to and creating paths for them, would we end up, if we're trying to create efficient cycling routes, and I, you know, the collector roads and above are sort of, you know, for the hardcore commuter cyclists, I would think, you know, yeah, we want to provide it so everybody can efficiently get from here they're going. But if we widen every road in town, are we building a lot of infrastructure that barely gets used? Or is there, you know, do people get into that level of planning where they say, okay, we're going to have this many bikes and they're going sort of in this direction. They need, you know, 1 or 2 buffered bike lanes and a bunch of widened lanes and some rural trails.
Yeah, I mean, through the chair, I think generally when you're contemplating an active transportation or a cycling network, it's less about how many cyclists we anticipate on each of these routes or how many routes we need to accommodate an anticipated number of cyclists. It's more about safe and comfortable facility provision and continuity of network that allows people to get from certain parts of the community to others. And so I think maybe somewhat at the root of your question would be sort of philosophically, is what's an appropriate level of widening and investment for a travel mode that has a relatively modest mode share at present? And I honestly probably not in a good place to sort of develop a conclusion for you on that one.
I'll let you off the hook then. Can I ask one more question? You showed some travel speed projections, which I think are today's travel speeds. And is there any possibility of forecasting those out to see what we'd be looking at the 2040 traffic volumes?
So yes, you're correct. Those are measured this year. So they're current, they're not projected. It would be very difficult to accurately project speeds over the and mapped the same way we did, where it's continuous over the whole corridor. What could be done with a reasonable amount of accuracy is figuring out delay and congestion at intersection locations based on future volumes and future performance of those intersections. And then you could pull together a bit of a assessment over the length of the corridor, factoring in each of the major intersections and sort of calculate the total length of that trip relative to how it is today. So it wouldn't quite be an apples to apples to that visual that we showed, but you could get a sense of that.
Might be interesting at some point. One of these every 2-year traffic studies, maybe. Okay, and then final one, and Chair, I beg your forgiveness. I might be straying a little bit here. I'm sort of familiar with intersections and, you know, level of service, A, B, C, D, or whatever it might be. Is there a corresponding one for roadways?
In terms of, maybe elaborate if you don't mind.
Well, you know, for instance, Metchosin Road, is there a sort of metric that would say at 2 lanes, it's level of service D, but if we could put a 3rd lane in for some of the side traffic, it would be level of service C? Or
there's nothing to that I'm aware of. It's typically the assessments are done at the intersection level, and either intersection as a whole or specific turn movements. Well, both of them, specific turn movements plus the intersection as a whole. I'm at least I'm not familiar with a measure for a corridor or linear component.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's see what we have here. Mr. Molnar, sorry, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to add, thank you very much, Chair Jensen. I just want to add to Councillor Parkinson, the Blue Toad system. once we start expanding, it is intended to cover the stretch of Wishart as well. So as well as intersection congestion, it'll start to be able to tell us real travel time. Once we get that in a loop format that's predictable, we'll publish that out to our community so they can watch it as well as the rest of the roadways. And it'll be on a 2-minute refresh cycle, and be more than pleased to continually update council as to delays on this segment of roadway, because we're looking to take a snapshot at Cairndale as well. I do need to, the real reason why I put up my hand though, was to make sure that I was clear in addressing Councillor Parkinson's earlier comment. And I just want to make sure that I was. Wishart Road is a collector road. If I said arterial, my apologies. It is a collector road as classified in our transportation master plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. Mr. Conrod, *6 to unmute. Are you there still?
Thank you, Chair. Before I finish off, would like to thank you very much for the time you've afforded me today. It's very much appreciated. My final comment would actually be on Veterans Memorial. And in the context, flow will result in increased traffic on Suk Road as well as Veterans Memorial, where it meets Goldstream and Highway number 1. Seems a lot of the focus is going to try and encourage people up Latoria Drive to Veterans Memorial. And as you know, Veterans Memorial, which is already showing significant congestion at the north end closest to the Island Highway from Goldstream Road to the Island turnoff. So what we're going to be doing, or looks like we are attempting to do, is have cars come to an already congested area. Traffic can back up sometimes that I've experienced to Meaford or Melford. So I was wondering if the increased traffic will tend to flow the route of least resistance, and that will probably be Chosen Road. Hence, we believe that the plan for Latoria and Veterans Memorial will solve the majority of the problems is in fact short-sighted and probably not correct. I'll sign off with that, and I say thank you once again for your time and your consideration. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Mr. Molnar, anything on that?
No, Mr. Conrad, through the chair, raises an excellent point. Traffic and the choices of motorists do tend to flow a little bit like water to the path of least resistance. But I want to reinforce what Mr. Casey's already identified as one of the key aces in the hole, and it was to Councillor Kobayashi's concern. Every 2 years, 3 years, we're going to be able to see which way the traffic is changing and morphing over the course of our continued build out. And I'll be pleased to report on them with council.
Thank you, Brent. Any other first-time speakers? Otherwise, we'll be back to Councillor Day. Go ahead, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to really make it clear, my concerns for our transportation network are about safety. And one of the big issues, in fact, it is what started me being involved with City Hall and being more interested in civic initiatives, and in fact led me to eventually run for council 20 years ago, and that was safety getting to school. And one of the big issues that we may be missing, and I'd like to know if it's possible to find a way to work around this, is to, so far all of our maps identify kind of where we're going the slowest in the city, but it doesn't identify where we're going too fast or where it may be dangerous for kids who say want to ride their bike to school. Wishart Road, for example, is a huge connector road, both for kids going to elementary, middle, and high school. I see them walking here all the time. And I really want to make it possible for students, whatever level of school you're in, to be able to ride their bikes. It's healthier and it's speedier and it's just good all around. And it was part of a big presentation at AVICC a couple of years ago to talk about the huge health risks to kids by not being more active in their transportation. So I'm worried whether or not we can identify where things are going really fast, because those S curves through Wishart Road area are areas where I often see people driving 60 kilometers per hour along that road. And I do see them drifting. You'll notice that the paint wears out because they're drifting over the edges of the road. And that makes it a lot less safe for kids to be walking or cycling in that area. And it makes it less likely for us to realize those active transportation goals. So could I just get an answer if we will be able to identify the high speed areas and identify those areas where we're having, the paint is disappearing all the time. So maybe we need to put something up to keep people safe.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, thank you very much. As part of this exercise that Urban System is working with us, we have not prioritized those or brought into the consideration. I suspect that this will work its way into a scope exercise, essentially to validate the cross-section. That's where I'm going to be coming back to council. And then before we went and did any design work for install. So I think the first piece we're going to see is that piece installed by Gablecraft and their consultants. We can certainly ask them to consider some of the speed curves as represented on the roadway. And you're exactly right. You can see wheel paths from the vehicles, and that's a great consideration of people cutting the corners for how we can go minimize that. We've seen other municipalities put up pickets and had those pickets mowed down by the next car that comes through that. There's lots of different options in terms of moving curbs in and around, or deflections, or increasing, making the curb sharper as opposed to softening them to make them faster. But that's not a part of the exercise today, but we can certainly bring it forward as we start to bring forward the projects. I think we'll start to see it in piecemeal format for Wishart. As I say, we've got a chunk in front of 3510 being built. Then the next piece is going to be added to by Gablecraft, which will give us a great piece of the puzzle for staff to be able to work with council on reinforcing the prioritization as recommended through the transportation 10-year master transportation plan and the sidewalk route, to bring in school, the bike lane and geometrics in terms of priority, and we can map forward those infill areas to add to the bits that the developer are building. So not yet, but still to come, and I think that's a great part to make part of the engineering exercise. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you, and I bet the Blue Toad stuff will help with that once we build out on that. So I'd like to bring us back to Mr. Casey and 5.3, which is the Veterans Parkway.
Okay, great, happy to. So I will just navigate us over here to share my screen. Okay, good. So we can all see the red visual. Good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate everyone's time here, and we're going to go through a similar exercise to the Wishart slide package, but do it this time for Veterans Memorial Parkway. So we'll work through that material, and then we can pause similarly for a discussion of that corridor and otherwise. So primary objective for this, similar to Wishart, confirm the desired long-term configuration for Veterans Memorial Parkway. We are dealing with the portion of Veterans between Suk Road at the north and Latoria Road in the south. Some of the parallel considerations, similarly, how will space be allocated within the road right-of-way? How do we balance the needs of each travel mode? And how will or should the corridor be built out to reflect context and street function within the broader network? So Veterans Memorial is classified as an arterial road. And so the intended function for an arterial is different than what we just went through for Wishart as a collector. So from your transportation master plan, arterial roads are intended for longer distance regional mobility and facilitate higher vehicle speeds. Often they're more than 2 lanes of vehicle traffic and support regional connections. So the look and feel and function of Veterans now probably reflects this definition very well. And we want to keep this in mind as we consider what this road might look like longer term. Overview of the corridor between Latoria and Soup Road is about 2.5 kilometers in length. There are walkways, sidewalks and walkways along portions of the corridor, but by no means are they continuous. Generally found in the southern section associated with either the park or some more recent developments occurred. We do have transit service in the northern portion, and so we've shown the location of existing bus stops with the solid green circle. In the southern section, there is planned expansion of service in future at some point, and so highlighted some possible locations for future bus stops as well. Land uses include primarily residential and even residential with controlled access, and so there's not a lot of direct, well, there's no direct driveway access to and from the corridor, but the adjacent land uses are residential primarily. Havenwood Park is an exception in the south end, as well as Latoria Walk, commercial and higher density residential. And then in the northern end, we've highlighted in blue where the Allendale redevelopment area is slated to occur. So really those are some of the key characteristics for the corridor. Similarly with the traffic volumes, we wanted to highlight, so I showed that visual earlier and I'll show it again about how traffic is projected to distribute itself along major roads out in and out of South Colwyn, as well as in and out of Allendale. And so what we're staring at here is Veterans Memorial sectioned out into 3 sections. The volumes in silver represent 2014, the volumes in red, 2019, the volumes in gold, the 2040 projections. And these again are average daily volumes. And so southern section, the section between Latoria and Cairndale, we are at about 9,000 vehicles per day currently. The projection has that increasing to approximately 27,000 vehicles per day. The section north of Cairndale, between approximately Cairndale and Allendale, currently at about 14,000 vehicles, projected to increase to up to 39,000 by 2040. Really, you'll see a bigger relative increase in this section of road as opposed to the portion to the south, and that again is the expectation that not only will vehicles come in and out of South Colwood via Latoria and then Veterans, a number will also come out in and out of South Colwood via Latoria, Wishart, and then Cairndale and Veterans. So we see, again, the layering on of the vehicles from south end of Veterans Memorial, as well as those that access and exit via Cairndale. So that's why there's the added jump there. And then for the section between approximately Allendale Road and Soup Road, we see about 14,000 today. There's basically no on and off today in that section, but the addition of the Allendale development in that area adds on yet another layer of vehicles via the Allendale Road intersection that bring the current volumes at 14,000 per day up to as high as 47,000 vehicles per day as they approach the Soup Road intersection. We did also want to highlight here that Soup Road is the division between to the south. The section we are dealing with here is municipal jurisdiction, so City of Colwood, and the portion to the north becomes provincial jurisdiction under the Ministry of Transportation. A summary on key stats. So we talked through some of the traffic volumes. We're between about 9,000 and 14,000 vehicles per day currently. Projections have it up between 27,000 and 47,000 vehicles per day, generally increasing the more north along the corridor you are. Speed limit is signed at 60 kilometers per hour. We have only a small number of intersections along the corridor and no driveways. And so it's functioning quite a bit differently than, say, Wishart or even Machosen Road, where we have more frequent intersections, more frequent driveways. This road was really designed with controlled access in mind, and the idea being maximizing capacity on the corridor and facilitating access to sites, specific properties from alternative routes. The road right-of-way is quite wide. So on the low end, it's about 27 meters wide, and it expands to up above 48 meters wide in places. And so this is extremely wide compared to most road right-of-ways you find, and does give the opportunity for added facility, added street if and when the time comes. Transit is on the corridor only in the northern half. Currently, it's the Route 52, but this corridor has been identified in both your municipal plans as well as through BC Transit planning as part of the frequent transit network. So it's a higher order route within the overall transit network. And so the expectation is that added transit service will be provided over time. And lastly, some of the key land uses and activities, which I talked about, Latoria Walk, Havenwood Park, as well as the Allendale development area. Okay, so here's a slide. We wanted to frame up how trips distribute themselves by corridor. For those trips that either travel north or south via the section of veterans that we're specifically looking at here, which direction beyond, once they hit the Sooke Road intersection, which way are they going? Or as they approach the Sooke Road intersection, how did they get there? And so that's what the diagram on the screen is showing. In gold is the section of Veterans Memorial that's south of Sooke Road, which is a city's jurisdiction, as well as Sooke Road, extending east from the Sooke Road Veterans intersection, also under city jurisdiction. And then we also wanted to highlight the sections in silver, which are veterans north of Sooke Road, as well as Sooke Road to the west of veterans as under provincial jurisdiction. So most important from this diagram is we can tell that approximately 3/4, 70 to 75%, these are approximate terms, but 70 to 75% of the traffic that finds its way on and off, onto this section of veterans begins or ends up this section of veterans that extends through Langford and potentially beyond. And so that's nearly 3/4. The remainder, 20 to 25%, is using the Sooke Road corridor, and that's under the city's jurisdiction. And discussions around confirming cross sections for that stretch of road have been considered in other sessions of council. And then we've got a more minor percentage of the overall vehicles that begin or end using Sooke Road to the west, and that's shown as about 5 to 7%. These figures were explicitly determined using PM afternoon trends, but when you look at the AM trends, they match up very closely as well. For comparison, we just wanted to pull some information from the portion of Veterans Memorial to the north of what we're looking at specifically here. And so there's a few different data sources that are out there, but we found the 2020 traffic volumes that are available through the CRD's traffic count program indicates for weekdays approximately 24,000 vehicles per day. And so this is the section on the approach through Meaford and on the approach to Coldstream. Now, we do know that past counts have put it up as high as 30,000 vehicles per day. We also can see in the data that assuming due to the commercial, the retail activities nearby here in Langford, that the counts are actually higher on a Saturday than they are on a typical weekday, which is not always the case, but typically found in and around a commercial destination like this. Sorry, can I ask maybe a mute? Yeah, great. That seems to have done it. Okay, so similar diagram we showed for Wishart. Emphasis now on the Veterans Corridor. And so talked to it before, the expectation is that somewhere around a third of all vehicles in and out of South Caldwell will do so along Veterans Memorial. I also introduced a couple times that we also expect that that percentage actually climbs to the north of Cairndale as vehicles use the southern portion of Wishart and then use Cairndale to make their way over to Veterans and go. So Veterans Memorial is anticipated to shoulder a significant chunk of the traffic in and out of South Colwood. And then when we get to the northern end of the corridor, we also see traffic related to the Allendale site development start to add on. And the bulk of that traffic is to and from the north. And so would do so access Veterans Memorial from Allendale and make their way north on Veterans, and then presumably with a similar split on Souk Road and Veterans, as we saw in the diagram just a second ago. So similar diagrams for median travel speed, AM on the left, midday in the center, PM on the right. We do see more or less free flow. What would indicate free flow on Veterans Memorial? We do see some slowdown, mostly in the AM and the PM on the approach to the Souk Road intersection. We do see a little bit of reduced travel speed also at the Latoria Road intersection. Otherwise, we do see some red and some orange there on the Cairndale side leg of that intersection, which indicates that vehicles are waiting on Cairndale, or they're slowed down on Cairndale as they wait to make turns on and off Veterans. And actually, the point I really wanted to highlight here is we had some other information that we were able to pull through TomTom instrument data, and the average travel speed for much of the corridor is up over 60 kilometers an hour. So it's in the 60 to 70 kilometers per hour range, which does indicate that, you know, traffic is functioning quite effectively along the corridor. And that really any of the intersections along here are not a real source of delay in terms of overall travel speed for the corridor. Collision history has been considered here. So again, these are reported incidences through ICBC data. Represents 5 years, 2015 to 2019 inclusive. Really, there are 3 locations that show the highest incidence of collision. Those are Souk Road at Veterans, that's Veterans at Cairndale, and then at Latoria as well. I just wanted to touch on each of these. There are some upgrades planned for the VMP Souk Road intersection in the not too distant future associated with transit and transit priority through that corridor, which will help address some of the safety concerns at this location. The Cairndale Road location is planned for some upgrades, and I'll touch on those in a little bit as development occurs in this area. And so improvements to be made through those works as well. And then also VMP and Latoria with talks of advancing roundabouts in that location. And so all 3 of these, while they do suggest a pretty good incidence of collision in these locations, there are plans in place that as improvements are made, they will be addressed. So just to reiterate your official community plan modal hierarchy, again, it's walking as a priority first, public transit, cycling, goods movement, high occupancy vehicles, and finally single occupant vehicles. We keep this in mind in our thinking about this corridor and others. And then reference to your transportation master plan. So I will walk us through what's being shown here on the left-hand side is been the endorsed and approved cross-section for the section of Veterans from Cairndale Road to the north. And so that includes basically 2 travel lanes in either direction, so 4 travel lanes plus a center median or turn lanes when needed. It indicates the presence of a buffered bike lane as well as a sidewalk, and so that continues to be a good treatment for that section of Veterans Memorial, and something that we're suggesting you continue on with. On the right-hand side of the screen are cross-sections contemplating the southern extent of Veterans, so the portion from Cairndale Road south down to Latoria. The cross-section that is in the Transportation Master Plan from 2014 is shown on the top. It's a 2-lane cross-section with bike lanes, sidewalks, and then potential for boulevard space as well. But with the kinds of volumes that we're seeing and projecting for this corridor, with the analysis that's been undertaken through the joint memo specifically, the recommendation is that previously contemplated TMP cross-section is updated to be consistent with the 5-lane cross-section that's moving forward for the northern half. And so that is shown at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So it is the same. It is consistent cross-section with what's in place for the northern section. And then, so to move our way along the corridor with some of the improvements that would occur over time, if we go from south to north, this again is information that has primarily been made consistent with what the conclusions and recommendations from the joint memo are, as well as the work on the Allendale site. So if we work from south to north at the Latoria Road intersection with Veterans, it's had initially been planned as a single lane roundabout with the potential to expand to 2 lanes. I understand now the push is toward a dual lane roundabout, so a 2-lane roundabout that would have added capacity for traffic through that location. And touched on this earlier, also added capacity to Latoria Road itself. So that's been contemplated for 50% build out of South Colwyn, and ultimately the exact year or timing of that would be dependent on the rate of progress with that development and traffic conditions on the corridor. Moving north, so I talked about this in the previous slide, is updating and expanding that roadway between Latoria and Cairndale to include the full 4-lane cross section plus that center left turn median piece. We also wanted to introduce, and this kind of goes for the entire corridor, but specifically in those locations where we don't have land uses, we have park or we have open space fronting the corridor, and there's not a need to provide access to adjacent parcels. A multi-use roadside facility might be a preferential treatment to bike lanes up against the road with sidewalks behind that. And so we've introduced the concept here of potential for a multi-use pathway. Moving north still, so the Cairndale Road intersection contemplated for signalization as well as additional turn lanes that allow vehicles to access VMP off Cairndale more effectively. That has been indicated for 15% build out, so not too far into the future. We move up to the Allendale site. So at the Allendale Road intersection, signalization with additional turn lanes that again facilitates vehicle movements on and off of Allendale Road, as well as a secondary access immediately south of there that would facilitate right in, right out only. So very much a secondary access point. So that's, I'll conclude on that. And I think we can entertain a similar dialogue as we did for Wishart Road. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Casey, for that. And Councillor Kobayashi, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Jensen. Through the chair to Mr. Casey. I'm just wondering how, so what's the plan here? How are you going to get people to, instead of going down Metchosin, to go up VMP? Is it because, and there's another problem I'm having, that maybe you can just define what the definition of an arterial road is, because the speeds are so different between VMP and Metchosin Road, but yet they're both arterial. So could you, those 2 questions, and the third question I have, just to wrap it all up, is has there been lots of consultation with the city of Langford, because the amount of building that's going on in South Langford now is just, wow. I drove down there and I just could not believe for the build out there. And it makes sense, because anecdotally, I can tell you now, when you come up to that 3-way cross section, because I live right by it, so I experience it every day. But the lineup from the Langford side is way longer, except when school's in. On the Colwood side, but the Langford side is just, it's amazingly long. So those 3 questions. Thank you.
Sure. So through the chair, I will probably tackle numbers 1 and 2, if that'd be appropriate. And I might ask the staff touch in on the Langford piece. But I think, okay, so when you look at both, which we compare Veterans as an arterial and Metchosin as an arterial, you're absolutely right that while their classification and sort of the desired function of both is the same, the nature and the current function of both streets is very different. And I attribute that to Metchosin being a road that has been in place for a long, long time and has probably grown up incrementally over time, and changed sort of in more nuanced, more modest ways, versus Veterans was built from new as a street intended, more recently intended to provide capacity, vehicle capacity north to south, in and out of Colwood. And so from that perspective, you are exactly right. Their function, even though same classification, the function is quite different, both volumes and potential volumes as well as speeds. In terms of what's the plan to encourage traffic to flow in and out via veterans, I think the plan really is the capacity that's built into Latoria to allow vehicles to make their way to and from veterans, as well as the capacity built into veterans itself, is really what's hopefully going to encourage more vehicles to use that corridor to realize what should be travel time savings, as opposed to working through the chosen or other major corridors to get in and out of South Colwood. The piece on coordination with Langford, I might ask that, Brent might be in a good position for that one.
No problem at all. Thanks for that segue, Dan. It's almost as though we coordinated that one. But through the chair to Councillor Kobayashi, keeping up with Langford in terms of their growth and their projections is an undertaking. One of the things that Langford has done, though, that makes it easier, frankly, for us to coordinate with them, is they use a singular traffic consultant that holds all of their master traffic data. So it's as simple as us reaching out to that consultant, going, I need the projections now, I need the projections in the future, as translated for the known information. Now, one of the challenges with keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with Langford is the fact that they may be less likely to adhere to their OCP because there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of their official community plan. So a traffic consultant can speak to what's known, what's projected on the books, but they can't speak to what's tomorrow. And so that's why it kind of goes to a live model. We do have excellent working relationships, though. So we've got the two influxes, which is the Latoria influx, which Langford has settled on a 3-lane cross-section for that piece of work. And what they did is they reconsidered their intersections to have a different category of consideration for what needs work and what doesn't. Where we might consider a C or a D as needing study and then implementation, they might have moved that to a D or an E. And I can get that specific for you to know how they've offset a bit of that timing. But we've directly fed into their input for traffic in the design of that roundabout, as well as the laning geometrics on the Colwood side on Latoria. In regards to Sooke Road, the Ministry of Transportation and Highways and Langford have worked very, very tightly in recent years for studies of the Jacqueline Road intersection. And Langford is very, very open. Michelle, their engineer, has been very, very open about sharing information. She's just provided me with 7 drawings that I can coordinate some of our Sooke Road works. And we've recently started increasing our communication with the Ministry of Transportation. And as Mr. Casey points out, improvements to bring about transit, frequent transit network improvements, as well as relating that traffic, is in the radar now for the Ministry of Transportation. So we do have coordination on that. It is trying to keep up as best as possible in that live environment by reaching out to the same traffic consultant through Open Venture with sharing information. And they've been more than approachable. And I thank them for that. Hope that answers your question.
It does. And Brent, while I have you on here, there is going to be one discouraging thing from using VMP. And again, it's anecdotal evidence, but I do it almost every morning now to get over to downtown or into Saanich. And it's great to go up. I mean, I live off Latoria, bump on there right up VMP, and you go great guns until you get past Goldstream. Yep. Because they got that single right-hand lane turn now. And I literally have to wait 3 lights to get through that to get onto the Trans-Canada Highway. And now I don't use it, period. I go down Sooke Road now. The hell with that. So I tell you, it's happening right now. Thank you.
No, Councillor Kobayashi, I've got to address it because that's bang on. That's one of the reasons why this slide was in the slide deck. You know, I mean, I think that if we translate out 20, 30 years, that section is being influenced by the ministry, not necessarily Langford. And that's exactly why I'm reaching out to the ministry, is to start to stitch that together. You hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. Just notice our time that we're starting to get a little long in the tooth here, and we have another meeting. So if we could be concise. Councillor Day, go ahead.
Thank you. So one of my big concerns with this area, VMP, is that the fast roads are really hard to live with. And I say this not because, you know, if people would just drive the speed limit, that would be fine, but nobody is. I'm just wondering if there is potentially a design standard that would be appropriate to keep the speeds more reasonable, like to the posted limit. I'm not trying to stop people from using the arterial road for its intended purpose. But when you live next to a busy road like Suk Road or VMP, it's really impacting your quality of life when traffic is fast. It just makes a lot more noise. It's hard to hear. It's hard to talk to people when you're walking, and it's hard to feel safe if you're walking beside that road. So I just wonder if there's anything you could say about that.
Yeah, I'd happy through the chair. I'd be happy to maybe shed a bit of light. I think it's a whole combination of factors, and a road like this. This isn't good news for you toward your question, but like a road like this has been designed, and I wasn't around when it was designed, but I can tell you it was designed intentionally to be able to travel 60 kilometers an hour, which brings in different sharpness of curves, vertical curves, and lane widths that allow for 60 kilometer speeds. And so the way to combat that would be narrower lanes. It would be a potential for some geometry that didn't allow you to travel as quickly. And then the other thing you do see, but you don't see it on roads you typically don't see it on arterials at all, and especially arterials like this, are targeted traffic calming type interventions, which generally are limited only to your residential streets or your lower volume collector type streets. You just don't see them on streets like this. Actually, if I could add, maybe the other piece is the enforcement piece, where whether it's active enforcement or more passive enforcement, where you use things like speed reader boards that will tell sometimes people it's not intentional. The road is designed in a way that they find themselves all of a sudden going faster than they should be. And so there are speed reader boards and devices like that it's not necessarily enforcement with the intent of issuing citation. It's enforcement through the intent of educating and alerting people to how they're actually how they're actually traveling on the street.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to put it out there. I think it's a very bad idea for us to 4-lane from Carindale to Latoria on VMP. And my reasoning is simple. This is not an area where we're getting big backups. We're getting long lines of traffic, but people are proceeding through that area with good haste. And what I don't want to see is another drag strip. Latoria Road and VMP have both been major attractants for road racing and fast driving. And I think that until we really need those extra lanes, we shouldn't develop them, because it is just leading people. This is not the part of the road that slows you down. As Councillor Kobayashi noted, it's approaching, and so did you, Dan, it's approaching Goldstream and those areas where a 4-lane road is now getting backed up. So we're not backed up except at intersections. And I think that the impact of those 4 lanes on the largely residential homes that are adjacent to it is much more negative. Thanks, that's it for me.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we're probably all getting tired here, and it'd be nice to move it on. So I've got 3 comments and 1 quick question that I'm sure you can answer for me. First one is I noticed that we're talking of a fair increase in traffic on Carindale Road itself. And at some point, we're going to have to look at that and possibly roll that into a DCC program as well. No hurry, so that's just a comment. Another comment is, I think one of the slides indicated that council had endorsed a road cross section for Souk Road east of Veterans. I'm not sure that's true between Veterans and Metchosin, but again, if it's not, probably we should, and if it is, then I'm wrong. That happens. We all know that. I note that the traffic volumes at Souk at VMP on VMP were predicted to be 47,000 cars a day. And then we saw a nice picture of VMP north of there showing the volume today is 24,000. So just imagine double that coming down that road. We are talking of an awful lot of vehicles here. And that gets into my last comment or question. The traffic splits that you showed us, Dan, where you showed sort of, I think it was 70% going down Veterans and 25% going down Souk and 5% turning west on Souk. Those percentages, are those of traffic that originated in South Colwood, or are those in traffic, including the traffic that came down Souk Road to that intersection from Langford?
Sorry. Those figures address vehicles that find themselves on the section of VMP specifically that we were reviewing. So the section between Latoria and Souk Road. It's some of them. It accounts for their approach and their exit. So it accounts for both directions, and it accounts for both AM and PM. So it is kind of all encompassing, but it is only those vehicles that find their way onto the section of VMP that we were looking at.
Thank you. I'm done. I'm done, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. That was brief for you. Brent.
Thanks very much. Just want to confirm Councillor Parkinson is correct. We have not looked at and validated any of the cross sections on Souk Road. So bang on, no correction.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Michael, you need to unmute if you didn't there.
I thought I had lowered my hand. Sorry.
Okay, so you have nothing to add?
No.
Thank you. Any final thoughts from anybody here? I don't see any motion that's required at all on this, on any of this material today. So it looks like the next meeting is June the 7th, and looking to adjourn. Sorry, final thought, Brent, did I miss something? Or are you good? Okay, thank you. And no Councillor Logan, so somebody throw up a hand for me. And thank you, Councillor Day, seconded by, well, we don't need one. Thank you very much, and we'll consider that adjourned, and we'll see you in a bit.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.